Hi, I'm Kendra Burton. In this tape we're going to do one complete oil painting step by step, start to finish. Remember, one of the best advantages of learning by video is that you can stop the tape and review as often as you'd like. I've had beginning students who look at some of my paintings that I teach in classes and say, "Oh, I could never do that." And I understand, because I felt that way at one time too. But as we paint, they discover that they can, and they do, and you can too. All you have to do is follow along with me. The painting that we're doing today is a landscape called the Misty Golden Forest. If you'll look here with me, as you can see, this painting uses values of warm colors, and it has a good light and dark contrast where the sun is shining through the trees. The mist and the colors were chosen to create a soft, peaceful mood. Now, the first thing we need to do before we start is to make sure that you have the supplies that you need. Now, once you have the necessary supplies, then you can prepare your palette colors. First of all, we'll start with white. We use a great big tube of white. You always use a ton of white. Make sure you squirt out enough so that you don't run out. The next color we're using is cadmium yellow medium. Cadmium orange is next. I'll just squirt these out around the edge here. Make sure you put them at the edge too of your canvas so that as you're mixing you can use the whole center palette. As you're mixing you can use the whole center palette to mix. Now, if you have trouble opening this, sometimes you'll get an old tube, and it's helpful to have some pliers to open that up. This is burnt sienna and burnt umber. I'm going to have a little help opening that yellow ochre, looks like. Burnt sienna and then burnt umber. Don't forget your yellow ochre goes right here. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to mix up a little bit of off-white. This off-white is where the sun will go. Will be done to create the sun coming through the trees. Now, as you mix this, you'll want to add just a little touch of yellow. I want to talk about a touch. That's as much. I don't know if you can see that, but just a little teeny bit right in the very tip. Be careful not to get too much yellow in this. Okay, there's a nice off-white. This will be for the sun. I'll see if we can get a little bit of this yellow ochre on our palette so we don't forget to squirt it out. Now that I've put this out, now what I'm going to do on this one is I'll mix as we go so that you can follow me, mix it, and then we'll paint it, and then mix some more and paint some more. Grab your little script brush, and we're going to do the layout on our canvas. You'll want to dip into your thinner, lots of thinner, a little bit of paint to do this. This is not a real difficult layout, and so we're only going to put a few lines in here. Make sure you don't get too much paint or it makes it difficult to get off. The horizon line we'll start with first. Try to make it straight across, pretty close to the bottom, maybe 1/4 of the way up from the bottom. Okay, there's the horizon line. We'll have a little bit of land over in here. This will be for some bushes and things. Another big piece of land over here. This is where we'll bring the tree up so that the sun can shine through that. Lots of thinner, little touch of paint. Now see, isn't that neat? That's all you have to do for your composition right now, for the layout. And then we'll paint, and that'll just give you some guidelines to go by. Okay, to start, we're going to use that off-white that we just mixed. Get a little bit of your medium. The medium I'm using is a quick-drying one. As you're painting, you may want to mix up about half and half linseed and thinner. That makes a nice medium. Now we'll come up to the canvas. You want to get a good balance on this. Don't bring your sun right smack in the middle. You want to have it over to the side. So we're going to put it right over this area. There's our sun. It's a little hard to see right now, but you'll be able to see it better in a few minutes when I start adding more color. Okay, about 3 inches. It's about the size of that circle. Then I'm going to get I'm going to mix up another color using the white and the yellow. This time I can add more yellow, but still keep it just a small amount. This is going to be a kind of a pale yellow color. Now this is pretty stiff. I'm going to just grab a little bit of my medium and just touch it in there before I even dip my brush in. I think that'll help make it a little creamier. Okay, this is a pale yellow color. This is going to go right around the sun. Now the sun, it's misty. Keep in mind it's misty, so I haven't done just a little dot for the sun. Now you're going to do rings of color. I'll tell you about 3 different colors of rings to put around the sun. First one is this pale yellow. Come in about like this. That's where your sun should be. In fact, I'm going to want to mix up a little bit more of this color, not necessarily for this part of it, but as we get into the path, we're going to do a little palette knife work on the path, and we'll want to have all these colors that we've just used ready to grab and lay on there. Okay, here still I'm working a little bit with this pale yellow. A little dab more white there. A little thinner. The thinner will help it go on more smoothly. Okay, here's some more to our yellow ring around here. Now to make it a little bit more vivid after the yellow ring, we're going to use a pure color. Usually you don't use a lot of pure colors right out from the tube, but I'm going to, just to give it a little bit more light, we'll dip into just a little bit of this pure yellow. This is cadmium yellow medium, and go right around the edge of that. Now it's okay if you let some of this paint that's in your brush kind of blend with this. You don't want it too bright, but just to add a little bit of color in here. Really scrub it in. We're using this Filbert, or it's not Filbert, it's a Bright, Bristle Bright number 12. So it's a really good scrubbing in brush. Okay, there's another ring. Then we're going to mix up a color. That's kind of an orange mixture. Grab some of this sienna and yellow, a little bit of orange. Okay, we're going to need quite a bit of this. Do mix up quite a bit of this. This goes on probably most of your canvas. In fact, more than that. See how fast that sienna tones down the yellow. Sienna's a really strong color. I'll grab a little bit of orange too. So we have those 3 colors: the orange, the yellow, and the sienna. Okay, we want to create. It's kind of a goldish, orangish color. That's what you're after here. Then we will apply this. It's our last little ring around the sun. Okay. A little bit of medium. Now this one, you want this to be out a little further from the sun. Actually, in the real world, you actually have a sun and it will be exactly the same on both sides. But in this one, we'll use a little artistic license. We'll scoot this out just a little further on this side because this one's going to come in a little closer on that side of the sun. Okay, you're going to cover a lot of your canvas with this color. Go right down to the horizon line. In fact, we'll actually fill in path 2 with this in just a minute. Now we're going to we'll leave these areas for the bushes, but we're also going to leave open some of this area right in here so that we can put in some of the leaves and the branches and things. Okay, here's a ring of color right around the yellow. Right up to that land in there. Scrub this in. Really scrub it in. Now here, I want a little bit more yellow left right out in here. So I'm going to dip into a little bit more of my yellow right there. Don't want it to get too dark too soon. Okay, back to this orange color. Still scrubbing in. This will remind you of doing if you've ever had a spa on the floor that you're trying to get out, this is exactly the way you do it. Straight into the spot and scrub around. Okay, you kind of lay it around the rings of color first, and then we'll blend it in a second. A little bit more of this orange, we're going to block in this path. This will be kind of the background of the other colors that we'll put over it when we do the palette knife work. Now just leave a little bit of a teeny tiny line right at the top of your path where it changes from path to background trees. Scrub that in. I'm going to I need a little bit more color here. Grab a little bit of orange and a bit of sienna. Okay, leave a little spot over there for some bushes. Don't forget that. Right up under. So we'll kind of just block this in. You don't really have to do a lot of detail. That's just kind of background stuff. Okay, then you'll want to do a little stirring. I'm going to change right near the sun to another brush. And just do little circles now. Over here, remember we did these great big ones. There's a little hair. If you do get a little hair on your painting, what you can do, the best way, sometimes you can get it with a brush, but the best way is to pick it off with your palette knife. That usually works well and it doesn't mess up your painting. Okay, kind of blend this in, little circles of color now. This is the Misty sun, so it doesn't have to be real small. Okay, that kind of a little circular motion, then we're going to do it out in here. This, see if you get these little circles of color and kind of do it this way, is going to make it look kind of like it's in the distance. We almost want to give it the feel that it's little leaves, kind of misty leaves back in the background. So little circles of color. Now I'm going to add a little bit. I still want to get some more yellow out in here. I'm going to add a little bit more of our light yellow. I'm just going to kind of touch it on at first and then I'll kind of stir it around. This again is to give us that kind of misted out background leafy look. Okay, little stirs. Stir, stir. To bring a little bit of it up into here, but do kind of keep it light. The neat thing about this painting is that it does have a neat source of light. Good source of light that makes a nice contrast in it. Okay, we'll scrub around a little bit with these colors in here. Adding a little bit more yellow. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go into, I'm going to go into another pure color. I keep telling you we mix a lot, but this is another pure color that I'm going to use. This is yellow ochre. I'm going to thin it out just a little bit. In fact, I want to thin it out even more than that. You want this to be kind of soupy. You're going to grab your fan brush. We're using bristle fan number 4 here today, or whenever. Okay, dip into this kind of soupy yellow ochre. Then you're going to put in some little background bushes. Now as you use the fan, let me show you, in fact I'll demonstrate up here what some people do. They do this little kind of a thing like this. I'll take that out in a minute. You don't want to do it quite like that, okay? As you're painting, now I need to take that off so you don't get mixed up. I don't want you to do that. As you're painting, I use a corner edge and another corner edge of my fan and turn it all over the place. See what I'm doing? All different shapes. You don't want what we call these little umbrellas in your painting. You want to have it nice and bushy. See, I've still got kind of an umbrella here. Turn, corner of your brush. Okay, pull a few of them over into here. Now this yellow ochre is going to be the leaves that kind of catch the sun. They're going to be on the other side of the trees that we'll see. Work some of this yellow ochre into here. Careful that you don't. Now you might see an umbrella on here, and don't get after me. If you do, just keep it in mind what I said. Okay, work some in here. In fact, now you can work a few, just keep it kind of light, over where the sun is. Just touch, kind of push it on there. Okay, a few little bushes up in there, grab some more. Still working with yellow ochre. Let's put even a few of these little ones back in here. Be real careful when you get close to the sun because you do want that sun to shine through. Okay, that about does it for that. Then I'm going to go to my great big old scrubber brush. This great big filbert bristle bright, or not a filbert, excuse me, it's a bristle bright. It's flat on the end instead of curved. Then I'm going to mix up a color that's kind of a rust color. Mix it right here. A little bit of sienna. In fact, it has about the same ingredients as the other one, but it needs more sienna. Nice rust color we're going for. Pretty dark. In fact, you want the least amount of orange. You want mostly sienna and yellow, cadmium yellow. Now you want to mix in fact I'm going to grab some more. You want to mix quite a bit of this. This goes in to a whole bunch of your foliage. I'm going to block that in with this color. Okay, I'll grab just a little bit of medium with it. I may need to dip in as we go, but that'll make it a little creamier to start with. A little bit more yellow. Okay. Now, grab your great big brush, Bristle Bright, number 12. We're just going to do the same thing we did before. We're just going to scrub this in. This is kind of a background blocking anyway. This is where your leaves come out. Scrubbing this in. Do a lot of scrubbing in this painting. Now let it overlap in here a little bit if you want to. Yep. As soon as you're blocked in, then you'll be ready to go on with the next step. But let's first block this in. This will, by the time we're done, this should fill in all of your canvas, and then you'll be ready to do other little finishing touches. Put in some trees in a minute, but we first have to block this all in. Just work with it. In fact, see, even though this is a big brush, you could actually use even a bigger brush on these huge areas. Need a little bit more pink. Gonna grab need some more yellow. This painting uses quite a bit of yellow. It uses a lot of yellow and sienna. Okay. Now you just block in the other little pieces of land that kind of come out in here. There's a little piece there. A little bit of medium to the color here. And we'll block it. Oh, I'll go block that in now. I've kind of left just a little bit of white right there so you can see the difference between the background leaves and the little piece of grass that's sticking out. Now the last little thing we'll do before we go on is block in this other. Still more yellow, more sienna. If you're mixing and you don't want to keep going in with a brush, you may want to mix just a ton of this color. This is what I call the rust color. Now we're going to paint in our trees. We'll put a little bit, in fact, this color is with the burnt umber. Use a little bit of thinner, and this one you can use pure, you don't even have to mix it up. I'm using the Sable Bright number 10 or 12, the sizes are really close. Okay, now to block this tree in, you'll want to have it kind of crooked, have it kind of follow up along this way. Make one on one side of the sun area and one on the other side that's not quite as big, a tree. A little bit more paint. It's okay to have this crooked. Sometimes I have people that come and they say, oh, I'm having trouble with this tree because it's going all crooked on me and I can't get it straight, and that's exactly what you want it to do. So if you have a nice old crooked tree, that's just fine. Okay, bring it on up past on this side of the sun. Now see, this white takes a little longer to dry, and so do the yellow colors. As you're painting, you want to kind of be careful that you don't pull too much white into it. There we go. This sable, the sable flat creates a real nice even line. And see, you can still get a little bit of texture in here by the way we're stroking this across. Now, let's make it just a little bit bigger. Still slant. See how crooked that tree is? It's okay if your tree is crooked. Now this, it actually goes right on up into these branches, but we won't make it don't take it clear off your canvas. Kind of let it fade kind of right as it gets right up in here. See, I'm still picking up a little bit of color. Now, one principle to remember too, I may have told you this, I'm not sure if I did, that the thinner paint will stick to the thicker paint that's below. Now, we painted on with not too much medium here below, so that it should be pretty thick, so that this on top, as it's a little thinner, should be able to stay on there. There, that's about how wide I want the tree. Now I'm going to kind of fill it in a little bit. If you need to dip into your thinner, you do want this quite soupy. Now you can still take a little branch off here. We'll actually do the little fine branches with our small little detail brush, but on this one you can take a bigger branch. Let's see, let's put one right about in here. Use the chisel edge of your brush as you're doing this. In other words, don't go flat out this way. You want to create just a small branch, kind of like that. That's about as much detail as you have to give that. Let me even up the edge here on this tree a little bit. You may want to, as you're painting this painting, when you have the background done, let it dry before you put on the trees so that you won't have trouble with running into wet colors. If you do paint it like I'm doing when you're wet in wet, it's okay because it actually ends up putting a little bit of texture in the trees, but either way is fine. Okay, then we'll have another one. We're going to make this next one just a little straighter in here. Kind of. And then you can kind of take a little split. It has a Y in it right in here. Widen up the trunk a little. Now this one, do be kind of careful that you don't make it quite as wide as the first one. A little straighter. Different angles make it more interesting too. Try to make sure that you get a nice even edge on this. When I say don't drag, drag means that the texture of the canvas, it means that your paint is just picking up the very top of the canvas, and you want to be really careful to get that into the canvas as you're painting. Okay, a little bit wider up in here. Now you can still use the same brush and put in a few more little branches. Let's put a couple more trees right over this area. These are even smaller, just to help it balance out a little bit. A couple branches off of here. Okay, that's pretty good. We'll put a little bit of something kind of growing over here. Now I'm just going to kind of mark it here so that we can get an idea of where we're going to put something. I'll go into a little bit more detail when we get over here with our detail brush. Now the next step, we're going to take the fan brush. I'm going to wet this down a little bit with medium. But the purpose of this is to just add texture, first of all, to what we blocked in here for the foliage. I'm really not going to grab much more paint. I'm just going to push this around. Here again, on your fan brush, you'll want to change angles with this. Don't hold it just straight. You don't want to get little umbrellas. In fact, I'll show you more about that when we get to the other colors. If you remember the little diagram I showed you the first two. Okay, this is mostly for texture. See, and you can push up along in here. This is kind of grassy. Overlap the trees. Fan brushes can do lots of things. Trees and leaves, grass. We're adding texture. Same thing in these other areas, and you can pull some across what you've just painted to make this tree look like it's going right up into those leaves up in there. If you need to grab a little bit of paint, that's okay. Mostly we're texturing, but we can add a little this color. Should be starting to look nice and leafy. Okay, a little bit more down in here. Push up from this one. You can push up or touch on. There are actually quite a few different things you can do with this brush. Now the next thing you'll want to do is to go into some other pure darker colors. You can use sienna without any mixing, burnt sienna, make sure it's burnt sienna, and then you can use burnt umber too. So I'll take a little bit of my medium, pull into the burnt sienna, and then I'm going to do just about what I did here before. I'm going to, you want to get this a little soupier now because you're going to touch it on and let it sit there. You're not going to really push and scrub. You're going to just, we'll mix a little of medium in here. Now we'll push into this like this and to kind of pick up our paint here. Now let this touch on. This is going to start to give it more dimension because you've got a variety of colors in here. Notice the different angles that I changed the brush to. Pure burnt sienna. It looks like I'm going to need some more of this color. Change the angle. Changing, use the corner side of your brush. Should be starting to get more texture now on this side. Now we'll add a little bit more. I darken generally right at the corners of the painting so that it creates, it kind of draws you into the center if the edges are a little darker. Keep in mind it needs to be a little soupier so that it'll stay on, because now you have a base. You've painted in the base and you want something to stay on it, so you want to thin it down just a little bit. I'm thinning with medium. When I say thin, you want to make sure it's not, you're thinner or it'll be really, really watery. You just kind of want to get it kind of soupy, kind of almost oily, but a little thicker than that. All around different angles. See, See, this is great. If you're painting and you want, you feel like, I think sometimes when people are painting, they feel like they need to be so careful and just perfect when they paint. But really, you can be pretty wild when you do it. And you don't have to be really confined to do this either. You can be really wiggly on your trees, and you can go all over the place with these leaves. So don't confine yourself as you're painting. Go ahead and let it be a little bit wild. All over, different angles. Now we're getting down into this little patch of grass. Left our trees, we're going to grass now. Still soupy burnt sienna color we're using. And brush is number 4. Then we're going to go back in a minute and grab the burnt umber and do this same thing all over again. But remember, don't put quite as much burnt umber into it. Okay, I'm just really quickly going to wipe off the brush here. You don't have to do much cleaning between these colors because they're both dark browns. Kind of a soupy consistency here. Do you remember why? Okay, the reason why is so that that will stick to the paint that's already on there. We've still got quite a bit of paint on there, so we'll you almost push into this too. Yeah. More color in the corners so that your eye is kind of led to the center spot where the light is coming in. Don't get too much in here. We're working. This is the darkest dark, and so you'll want to keep it toward the outside. Pure burnt umber. Kind of tap, tap, tap. Let it sit there. If you feel like it's not going on, it may be because you're not thin enough. Grab a little bit more medium, and that'll let it sit on top. See what it did? A little bit more dark because we're in the corner now. Doesn't that sound like the sound you like to say when you do this? It just reminds me of it. Okay, we'll pull some of this over here, a little bit more dark in this corner. Touch, touch, touch. See if you find you're not getting any paint to stick on, grab some more, make sure it's thin, and it'll work. Now you may want to add a little bit darker in certain places to create a fold in the land here. You want to create a little fold here and here, so we'll put a little bit of dark right there. See how that pushes that back a little? Right here it'll push it back too. Now the next thing that we're going to do is the palette knife path. And for this you'll use all of the colors that you've already mixed. Now it looks like I'm going to have to mix a few more of the colors. You want to have piles of colors for this. So we've got a light yellow. I'll only use just a little bit of this white, so that might be enough. We'll use your light yellow color, need a little bit more medium. You'll want these to be thinned out a little bit too. I'm thinning them out with medium. Want the light yellow. The next color you'll want, remember we put around in here on the painting. It's kind of in the background of the painting, which is your yellow. It's nice and creamy. Orange, a little bit of orange, yellow, and umber. Palette knife work is fun. Palette knife can give it a lot of texture too. Okay, we'll want that a little bit lighter because the next one we're going to have, which uses just about the same colors, is going to be a rust. So you kind of want an orange here first, then rust. A little variety of color. We may even go into some pure cadmium orange here. There's more of our lighter orange, the background orange that we used anyway to mix. Now we'll go for the rust color. Mix up a little bit more of that. Okay, then, let's see, we'll just use these colors pure. We may need a little bit more of this. That's burnt sienna. Now you're learning the colors of all these warm colors. Burnt sienna and burnt umber. The burnt just means it's a little bit more red. If you find a color that's raw, it's called raw sienna or raw umber, it's not as much red. Okay, we should have pretty much, I'll just have pure ochre too. I won't pull it over there. Okay, now you'll start with more of the dark colors when you do the palette knife path. I will first show you a little bit about using the palette knife. If you'll look here with me for just a second, we'll grab a little bit of the color. In fact, let's start with kind of the medium color, maybe a little bit of this rust. To load it up as you're painting onto the top part of your palette knife. Okay, it's going to be the part that as you hold up next to the painting, it will be on the top, if you can see that. Okay, that's how you load up your palette knife. Then, to paint with it, all you do is pull across and let it sit there. Now, I talked a little bit about dragging. On the trees, I wanted you not to drag. On this one, let it drag. And by dragging, I mean just let it pick up the top little fibers of your canvas. And that's okay. This is what makes it so fun. I think sometimes people get a little worried about palette knife work. But if you can think of this as something that you might be a little familiar with, maybe you've frosted a cake or something, this shouldn't be as difficult if you can think of it in terms of something familiar. The other thing to keep in mind is as I'm doing it, I'm really not holding the palette knife very tightly. It's really quite loose in my hands. If you can see this, if you were to come up to me, you could probably pull it out without any problem because I'm holding it so loosely. Okay, a little bit more of this rust that we mixed up. Should look nice and textured. Dragged across. Now you can go into some of the orange mixture, which was the same as our background here. Just mixed up a little bit more of this. Go ahead and lay it on thick. If you like nice, thick texture, this is the time to do it. I think this makes it look really neat to get that effect. See, boy, I'm really letting it stay on there. Lots of nice, thick texture. Move it over to the edge. Okay, let's grab a little bit of the yellow ochre. Smash it around a little bit over here. My yellow ochre is pretty stiff. If it's stiff in texture, just take a little bit of medium and that will help. Now we'll grab some of the lighter colors, the lightest color, except for off-white. This is the color that we called our light yellow, the one that we used next to the sun. Okay. Now the light yellow you want to have right at the top of your painting, right up in here. This is closest to the sun as we see it, right along here. And this will bring light into your picture to do this. Now if you want to work a little bit of yellow into here, you can. I'm usually careful with pure colors so that I don't use too many. But it's all right. In fact, if you go over something that's already done, that's all right too, because then you get kind of a marble effect. Yeah, just a little bit more light yellow to bring in some sun here. Now I won't bring much of the light color around in here because this is going to have a little bit of darkness from the trees and also from this little piece of grass. So you can actually pull a little bit more dark right in here. A little bit of rust. You can take some more burnt sienna if you'd like to and put some in there. This is a darker area. Okay, now there are only just a few more things that we'll do before we finish up. One thing is take the little detail brush, dip into your medium, get it nice and thin, and we'll do some details with our branches. Over here where we gave a hint of where these little twigs would come, we'll do that. Make it wiggly. Go ahead and wiggle as much as you like. Probably the wigglier the better. Okay, a few more branches. Let's bring a few more branches out in here. Coming up from the top, it's okay if you bring them down. They would grow that way. A few more maybe over in here. Make sure your paint is nice and thin too so that it will stay to it. You can bring a few up from the ground on this side. And if you want to use your fan brush to tap a few little branches over this that we just did, you can do that. Then the last little step that we'll do is to bring the sun hitting on the trees. And to do that, you also can use your little detail brush and go into some of your yellow, and this will be light. Now, when you add the detail, highlights on the trees come on the inside of the largest tree closest to the sun. That'll lighten it up just a little bit and it'll make it look like the sun is really coming around there. Another little highlight on this side of the second largest tree to bring the sun in. Now you can work in a little bit of yellow or a little bit of orange in here, and that should do it. Doesn't that look fantastic? Okay, now if you felt like you needed just a little bit more detail, you may want to darken up in this area with your fan brush. Maybe touch that up just a little so that it still creates this darkness. If you want to, you can add slight kind of shadow in here from the sun, of course, coming this way. And also kind of block this off a little bit more distinctly over in here. There, now that looks more like grass to me than just a blob of dark. Okay. That should do it. Now, I'd like to show you, this is in an orange and gold and rust theme. And sometimes when you start, you think, oh, gee, what could I do to be different or to discover and to learn? Well, one thing you could do is, instead of doing this kind of a scene in warm colors, you may want to try something with cool colors. Now, I have a painting here that will show you, in fact, I hope you can see this, same composition or layout done on the cool scheme, using a little bit of the blues and the greens. You also can change, now I have changed colors to, well, I'll show you a couple more of these too. Here's the same composition, still again, the light shining through the trees from the back of the trees. This shows you how different colors can create different moods too. One has kind of the pinks and the wine colors, and the other one is done in very lavender and cool, almost nighttime colors. You can really create different moods using similar techniques with different color schemes. Now, don't you feel like walking right into that misty golden forest, to feel the warm sunshine on your shoulders, to see where that path is going to lead you? I hope you've enjoyed this painting. Remember, there are still cool mountain streams, majestic mountains, quiet meadows, or maybe rolling waves of water. They're all waiting to be captured in one of your next paintings.